Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 16.1 Beta 3 has been out for a few days. I've been using it full time on my iPhone 14 Pro Max. I wanted to share the overall experience and go over some more new features that have been found since the initial What's New video. So I covered a bunch of features. There's been more that's been found since then. So we'll cover that, talk about my experience and your experience based off the YouTube community poll where there's over 15,000 votes and 164 comments. So we'll talk about the overall experience, how it's going with this beta update and iOS 16.0.2. Now, the first new feature is AirPods Pro get an update. So not just the second generation, but the AirPods Pro, the first generation. If we wait for them to connect, give them a moment. There we go. They're connected. Now they're in our menu. Under settings, if we scroll down, we now have adaptive transparency. So this is a new feature that's part of the AirPods Pro second generation. So when you're using transparency mode, it actually listens for loud noises. Apple actually showed someone at a construction site. It will bring those noises down, but you can still hear what's around you. So that's something that they've added to this update, which is really great for these AirPods. However, we may need a firmware update for the AirPods in order to see that. These actual AirPods are actually on firmware 5A304A, which is a beta. So maybe we'll need that, maybe we won't. But either way, once 16.1 comes out, it looks like we'll have that feature. Now, they've also updated the AirDrop icon. So if you have an iPhone 14 Pro nearby, if we go into maybe photos and then we AirDrop, you'll see here that they've updated the icon to match the iPhone 14 devices. So you'll see it says 14 Pro. Not all of them were matching before. It didn't show the correct sort of phone itself. So you've got the dynamic island there and everything else. So it's a small update, but just a small detail Apple has updated in this version. Now, if we go back into settings and then we go down to accessibility, under accessibility and then touch, at the bottom, we have back tap. Under back tap, just choose one, scroll down, and we now have Apple Watch mirroring that can be controlled with back tap. So before that wasn't an option. Now it is with double tap. So if we double tap the back, let's see how it works. There it goes. It tries to connect to the watch and hopefully it will mirror. This may or may not work, but it looks like it's connected and there we go. So that's something they've updated and it now works properly. So that's great that it's an easy way to get into that if you need that for accessibility. Also, some people are saying that when you have the always on display turned on, some are saying it's actually darker than before. Maybe this is a battery saving tactic from Apple, but either way, some are saying that it's darker. I haven't noticed too much of a difference, and it's also adaptive based on the ambient light. So if I turn the light off, you'll see it dims down a little bit. Turn it back on, and it sort of brings the brightness back up. So it is adaptive, but either way, some people are saying that it appears to be a little bit darker. On the Apple Watch, if you go under workouts and you're on watchOS 9.1 Beta 3, you may have a prompt to show you how to get to different types of workouts. So that's something some people are seeing. I'm not seeing, but Bram from TechRender sent this over. So let's take a look. You'll see here, he had a little dialogue at the top that said how to see more workout types, and then tapped on it and it says tap the three dots to set goals or use workout types like custom or pacer. So that's something some people are seeing. Like I said, I'm not seeing that on the latest beta. Now on iPadOS 16 Beta 10, or you could call it iPadOS 16.1 Beta 4, it's a little bit confusing, Apple has updated something here as well. One of the things they've updated is specific to the 11-inch iPad Pro, where you go into display and brightness, and then you can change the overall display zoom, where you have an option for more space. This wasn't there on the 11-inch before, now it's there. So some people are not seeing more space altogether, but apparently it's on the 11-inch iPad Pro. This is the 12.9, so it's always been there. Also, they've updated this, so if you go into split view, within split view, if you tap on the three dots at the top and then tap on split view, it now says left split and right split. Before it was just icons, now you can just tap on the button, and if we tap on it again, we can move it over to left split. So that's something they've just updated with little icons and wording underneath it this time. Now, also before, when we talked about what's new in this update, if we go back to our wallpapers, this is something they updated. I'm just curious what you think of this. Do you think this is a big improvement where we can customize each part and add a new wallpaper? Personally, I'd like to see them change that on the lock screen. So if you went into here, had a button for customize, hit that and it would bring you right to that. It would be a lot easier, I think, where I just think the interface needs more consistency this time around, and sometimes I'm just not a fan of the way they've chosen to do this, but I guess they keep changing it to try and improve it. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Now, the other day, Apple stopped signing iOS 16, the initial version of iOS 16, and also iOS 16.0.1. That was specific to the iPhone 14 devices. That means you can only downgrade to iOS 16.0.2, or really upgrade to it or restore from it if you're already on it. So unfortunately now there's no downgrade path. However, in the future, I would imagine they'll leave 16.0.2. However, this makes me think maybe we'll have a 16.0.3 before 16.1. It depends what the timeline is. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is Apple removed external display support on the iPad. So that was a bit disappointing. We can't use that on the M1 iPads anymore with an external display. In the future, we'll be able to, according to them. It'll be in a future update, but right now we won't be able to use that. That's something I actually liked and used with different displays on the iPad. So if it's something you used, I wouldn't upgrade to Beta 3 just yet. However, if you're on the previous versions, just stay on Beta 2 if you use that a lot. Otherwise, they'll bring it in future updates, maybe iOS 16.2. Now with 16.1 Beta 3, it seems to be okay on my device, but it definitely has some bugs. But many people have asked me, have they fixed the ESPN landscape video where it wasn't working properly? It would sort of just go up into a corner. So we'll go into ESPN. Now in ESPN, if we turn it sideways, you'll see that landscape video works properly now. If we go back, it goes back properly in portrait mode. So that seems to be working. Apple updated something so it fixed some issues with video. However, I'm having some odd bugs with this particular update, mostly due to lag and things like that. So if I go into maybe an app, I go home, oftentimes when I go home, it will sort of stutter and stop and then go home. So I can't always reproduce it, but sometimes going into different apps, whether that be ESPN, going back out, going over to maybe the home app, it seems to stutter from time to time. Many people seem to have issues with that, and I've seen quite a few people say that even the home app is unresponsive. So there's still some lag and stuttering going on. What's causing it is hard to say. Also, music and video apps sometimes keep playing even after you've closed them. So maybe you were watching a video, whether that's in an app or on Safari or listening to music, you close it out and fully close it out. Sometimes it just doesn't stop. It keeps playing and you have to wait a second and then it stops. So there's some odd bugs in this particular update. Also, there's continued CarPlay issues, more so for the 14 devices. For whatever reason, they seem to have issues with audio. And then also Photos crashes an awful lot on me. If I go into Photos, you'll see here's today's wallpaper. Of course, that will be linked in the description. If I go to share this photo, maybe airdrop it or something else, sometimes it just doesn't work properly. The button doesn't work at all. And sometimes it just completely locks up. When I was airdropping this wallpaper to myself, it locked up. I couldn't use it. I actually had to close out of Photos altogether, close the app completely, and then go back in, and then it worked. So I've seen that over and over with this update. So there's still some issues there. Now, as far as overall performance seems to be fine other than those stutters. So as I mentioned before, in the earlier What's New video, the performance seems to be really good, and Geekbench scores prove that, but just scrolling through different things, opening different apps, so music seems to load nice and quick. You'll see it's fast there, and it's also recommending a new release here at the top. And then also just going into different apps seems to work just fine. So maybe we'll just go into fitness here. Give it just a moment. You'll see it loads nice and fast. No issues whatsoever with that. Just those occasional stutters and sort of hiccups, but there's definitely some issues. So if you're having issues, again, make sure you report this in the feedback app. That's definitely important as Apple looks at those and sometimes will even respond to you asking for more information. As far as the overall heat of the phone, this phone has been super cool as far as not being hot or overheating. I haven't noticed any really temperature differences using this update. It's staying nice and cool overall. So I know some people seem to have those issues, but let me show you with the thermal camera. Now, as you can see with the thermal camera, we're at about 84 degrees Fahrenheit. That's much cooler than we had with the 13 Pro Max, where we were about 94 degrees at times, maybe even hotter. So just filming this video, it's staying nice and cool, even with the display on all the time. Now, as far as overall battery life, it's really going to vary depending on what apps you're using and what device you're using. Now, if we go into settings, go down to battery here Under battery, of course, this is at 100% because it's a new phone. After a full year using the 13 Pro Max, I believe it's at 98% still. So if we go into it, it still says 98%. And that seems to be about right, at least for me. About 5% or maybe less in a year. However, I charge it every night, so I've talked about that in other videos. But as you can see here, if we take a look at the last 4 days, yesterday, I really didn't have very good battery life at all. 1 hour and 38 minutes of screen on time, 5 hours and 19 minutes of screen off time, and used almost 50% of my battery. The day before, 4 hours and 52 minutes of screen on time, 6 hours and 23 minutes of screen off time. Now I switched back to this device after reviewing the 14 Pro. So I used both of them on the beta for a little bit. I found that I actually had to charge the 14 Pro throughout the day because of this update. So it really depends on what you're doing. I continue to customize my home and lock screen as far as notifications, as that's what's causing it to light up the display more and use more power. However, there's still some issues as far as battery life for me, but that's not the case for everyone. And we'll take a look at that in the comments in a little bit. But let's take a look at some battery life that was sent in by Abhishek on his 11 Pro Max running on this device. And he had 4 hours of screen on time, 2 hours and 29 minutes of screen off time, and used about 50% of his battery. So that's pretty good for an 11 Pro Max. On the iPad, battery life has been pretty terrible, I think, for me. And that's usually okay sometimes on this device, 5 or 6 hours, but you'll see it was last charged a couple days ago, and I have about 5 hours of screen on time. So 5 to 6, again, is what I'm getting all the time. You'll see, I think we started at 16%, we're down to 13%, and we just have the screen on, of course. But it's just not the 10 hours that I would expect. And hopefully when the new iPads Pro come out, we'll have some better battery life. But either way, it seems to be around 6 hours on the iPad, which I just don't think is very good. Now, as far as future releases, iOS 16.0.1 was unsigned, like I said, and iOS 16. That leaves us with iOS 16.0.2. And since we're only at beta 3, we might see an iOS 16.0.3. If we do, I would expect it fairly soon. And then, of course, we'll see iOS 16.1, which adds all those bug fixes and adds new features. So 16.0.3 could be within the next couple of weeks, but I do expect iOS 16.1 beta 4 this Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, depending what Apple decides, and then maybe a beta 5 and then a release candidate, or maybe beta 4 could be the last. Then we'll have a release candidate and a final release sometime in mid-October. I would expect that, along with iPadOS, to finally release to the public with iPadOS 16 and macOS Ventura. Apple said those are coming in October. We just don't know specifically when, as they haven't given a date yet. So maybe in a couple weeks, or it could be at the end of October. But we do expect new iPads as well as new Macs, updated processors. We may or may not have an October Apple event. If we do, we might see that Mac Pro and some extra things, but at this point, it looks like it may just be an announcement. Now let's go and take a look at the comments and see what you had to say, as iOS 16.0.2 has been great for some and not others, and also the beta has been great for some and not others. Now, if we take a look at the YouTube community poll, you'll see here at the time of this video, there's 15,000 votes, with 17% saying that beta 3 is great, 11% saying it has bugs, and 4% saying it's terrible. 60% of you are on iOS 16.0.2 or older, and 8% are on 15.7 or older. Now let's see some of the comments and what you had to say. I chose randomly from these comments, so let's take a look at them. Anthony Lombardo said, I'm running iOS 16.1 beta 3. So far, the battery seems much better. I get about 7 hours of usage time on my iPhone 13 Pro. Lawrence says, for once, for me, it's actually better than the previous one. I normally don't really have problems with betas, but the last one, my bank widget didn't work all that great. Happy that it's been fixed. Everything else works though, so I really can't complain. Ibrahim says, worse on the iPhone XS. When opening or closing tabs in Safari, swiping to close on either side, the animation is laggy. Also, one of the widgets got broken, but probably from the app itself needing an update for the new iOS version. Battery life is worse since updating to iOS 16, and the betas didn't help. I know it's still a beta after all. Nate W. said, I'm using iOS 16.1 beta 3 on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. All I can say is that it's been perfect so far. Battery life is great, along with smooth animations, no app crashes, and probably my favorite feature, the updated battery icon/animation. Can't wait for Can't wait for the public release along with the future iOS 16 updates. Mashed Potato said, running great on my iPhone 13 Pro, no bugs, though I wish Apple changed the battery percentage to show the battery percentage below the battery image when the display is turned off. And so thank you for all of the comments. Like I said, I always read through all of them so I get an understanding of what the overall update is like for everyone. So depending on what version you're using, it really depends on how your overall battery performance and just what apps you're using can really affect that as well. Manish Bansal says, hi Aaron, I'm using iOS 16.0.2 on iPhone 10. The battery drain is the same as iOS 16. Sometimes devices heat up very much despite not using the case. Sometimes the device lags while using for a few moments. Apple should come out with 16.0.3 to fix the problems. And so with these updates, it's really hit or miss, I'm finding this time around. My family's running 16.0.2. I've heard no complaints from them, but I've heard complaints from others on older devices running it that have poor battery life, such as an iPhone 11 Pro Max. So it really depends, again, on the device and what's going on as far as your apps and more. But either way, hopefully that helps you this week with what's going on with iOS 16.1 Beta 3. And of course, if you've found anything else in it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, like I mentioned earlier, it will be linked in the description below. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.